Hello, welcome to the Vineyard Church podcast. For more information, visit us at vkcwest.com.
You know, we've been going through the book of Daniel. We did chapter 1, and then Steve did more of kind of a perspective message last week, talking about some of the things that we see Daniel do. And it was an excellent message, and talking about how we read people like Daniel doing prayer and fasting, but then we say, well, that's nice, I know that, but it's like, well, let's do it. And so I encourage you, if you didn't hear that, to walk through that, and it will move you towards Christ for sure, in bringing him into your everyday life. But, you know, our condition is not that different from Daniel. See, it's interesting. Sometimes we read scripture and we think, well, Daniel's just playing a part. No, Daniel didn't know that he was in the book of Daniel. Make sense? Like, he was just living his life, trying to seek after God. In chapter 2, what we see here, he was probably 17 to maybe 20 years old. And I don't know how you were at 17 or 20, but Daniel is like going all out for God, and he's impacting his world, even though the pressures are great. And it seems like this world, it goes back and forth on us, like if we try to live in the way of the world. And similar to like our government today, right? And to help you understand that, I had an experience with a dog a few weeks ago, and it was the weirdest week. I got a speeding ticket. I had this encounter with this dog I'm going to tell you about, and then my son got in an accident that he shouldn't have lived from. You know, I mean, just it was the craziest week. But this dog, I'm walking through my neighborhood, and my dog and I are walking, and it's just such a good walk. It's beautiful weather, but then all of a sudden, there's these two dogs just like looking through garbage, whatever, and I'm like, oh man. And I say to myself, should I walk around and turn away, or should I keep going? And so we keep walking, and one of the dogs goes into a home, but this other dog is just super aggressive. And I've gotten better because Michelle's taught me how to interact with dogs, because I had bad experiences with dogs when I was a kid. But this dog just kept coming at us. He's just super aggressive with my dog and wouldn't let us walk, and just was in his face, and he's slobbering. I'm like, gosh, does he have rabies? You know, all this stuff's going through my head. So I'm trying to, but Michelle told me I'm like, hey buddy, hey, how's it going? Good dog, go home. And so I'm trying all that. And so 10, 15 minutes later, like, we can't go. And he's just super aggressive, get between me and the dog, won't let us walk. And so I'm like, hey, go home. And people are coming out of their homes like, hey, do you want my son to come out and help you? That'd be great. And yet no help, you know. And so I'm calling like animal control, because I'm thinking the dog's ready to attack, like, because he does attack my dog some. And so I call animal control, and they didn't answer. So I'm like, well, and so, I mean, that's the place where I'm at, is I'm scared for my dog. I'm not scared for me, because, I mean, I could take down the dog, no problem. Yeah. So finally, the dog gets bored or something. He goes off somewhere else. I'm like, okay, this is our chance, but just like, don't run, just walk. So we walk. And then all of a sudden, the dog is like looking at us. He's smiling, you know, the look when dogs have, and then he's cruising through the neighborhood with us. Just walking with us. He's go over here, cause problems, and other people, what are you doing, dog? And to the point where, you know, we get to my house, and I'm like, okay, come on. He doesn't see. We go in my house, and then we have a glass front door, and then he's just like this in front of my door. You know, and he's like, come on, guys, let me in. You know, so it was this extreme where I'm fearing for my dog and I's life, to all of a sudden, he's like, you are my people. Isn't that kind of how the world is? Or kind of how the government is even? Like, you know, for 4 years, some people may be like, man, I'm so scared out of my wits. What's going to happen? And then the next, 4 years, you're like, yes, they're my people. Isn't that how the world is when we set our expectations on the world? Is we go from fear to joy to comfort to back and forth, and it will always, always let us down. Because it's a temporal kingdom. And it will fade. Only God's kingdom will last. And only God's kingdom is worthy of you and I. And so that's what we read about today in Daniel chapter 2, verse 1. And we see that the advisors of King Nebuchadnezzar are out of touch and lacking for real situations. You know, you and I have real situations happening today, real things that are going on, and we need real answers, don't you? I mean, don't I? We need real answers. And yet, we don't need half measures. We don't need things that just touch the surface of life, which is the ways of the world. We need things that are really lasting change. And so does King Nebuchadnezzar here. In the second year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His mind was troubled and he could not sleep. So the king summoned the magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and astrologers to tell him what he had dreamed. When they came in and stood before the king, he said to them, I have had a dream that troubles me, and I want to know what it means. Then the astrologers answered the king, May the king live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will interpret it. The king replied to the astrologers, This is what I have firmly decided. If you do not tell me what my dream was and interpret it, I will have you cut into pieces and your houses turned into piles of rubble. But if you tell me the dream and explain it, you will receive from me gifts and rewards and great honor. So tell me the dream and interpret it for me. Once more they replied, Let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will interpret it. Then the king answered, I am certain that you are trying to gain time, because you realize that this is what I have firmly decided. If you do not tell me the dream, there is only one penalty for you. You have conspired to tell me misleading and wicked things, hoping the situation will change. So then, tell me the dream, and I will know that you can interpret it for me. The astrologers answered the king, There is no one on earth who can do what the king asks. No king, however great and mighty, has ever asked such a thing of any magician or enchanter or astrologer. What the king asks is too difficult. No one can reveal it to the king except the gods, and they do not live among humans. You know, I'm not sure telling like a really prideful, king that wants to be the top person in all the world, thinks he's a god, is telling him, hey, no one's ever asked this before. I mean, he's probably like, yes, I'm completely unreasonable like any other before me. And yet that's what he does. Some people see a problem in the chronology, just to nerd out for a minute, in verse 1 here, because it says it was the second year of his reign. And if you're walking along with us, chapter 1, it says that Daniel and his friends would go through 3 years of training, and then they would be put into the court. So we already read that in chapter 1. So wait a minute, how can be King Nebuchadnezzar's second year? People have wrestled with this. Here's how I think we relieve the tension some, is that his first year, and this was standard for kings, the first year of their reign would be a year of ascension, kind of like a internship in a sense. They're king, but not fully king. And we know that around the time that he overtook Jerusalem, his father died. His father was the king before him, and then he came back to Jerusalem. So that would be year 1 of his reign, but it wasn't quite that. So it was ascension. And then year 2, and then year 3, and that's where we end up here. So that's how we end up. It's only his second year of his reign. And it says he had dreams. His mind was troubled and he could not sleep. The word troubled here means he was deeply disturbed. I think we all get there at different times in our lives where we're deeply disturbed. Maybe sometimes it's just watching the news, or maybe it's just thinking about the future or things that are happening. Or maybe sometimes it's dreams like this where we wake up and we're like, man, this is really threatening my existence. I don't feel safe. Well, that's how he felt. And I think he felt like his reign was being threatened in some ways. I mean, he's a new king and confident, but not fully confident. And we'll see what the dream was, and you'll understand why he felt threatened. He'd only been king for a short time. But his go-to, you have a go-to, I have a go-to. Like if I'm going to enjoy a meal, or if I have like open time, what am I going to do? We all have those go-to things that we do in certain situations. Well, when Nebuchadnezzar needed wisdom or needed insight, he would call these people, they were magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, or astrologers. Some versions, translations actually say like Chaldeans. That's a term to just sum all of them up. They were his advisors. But in general, the terms that are there, it really means that they practice witchcraft. And so they practice sorcery and all sorts of different arts to do things, like they would get out livers and entrails and try to read them and tell the king certain things. And their wisdom and power are shown to be inadequate. Maybe you have had a time like that. Actually, you probably have. where you looked and you saw that your go-to to make you feel better or to satisfy you, all of a sudden it was inadequate. Or maybe you had people that you asked for wisdom and understanding, and they didn't have the answers for you. I know for me as a child, all the answers, like I was so afraid of dying, and I was so afraid of what really meaning was of things. We're just a non-religious home, and so, those big questions in life, it was kind of like, I don't know, my dad was a cowboy Marine, and my mom was a flower child from Berkeley, and so it's just kind of, I think both just kind of went off into the direction. And, great parents, but those answers weren't there. As I walked through those things, it was just like, go to sleep, And I found that lacking and wandered through. But then when I was 15 years old, all of a sudden somebody gave me a little track, that had Jesus surfing on it, because I lived on the coast. And it says, yes, Jesus really is King of the waves. And that got my mind going. I still have it. It's in my dresser. And it just got me going. It's like, really? So Jesus is King of the waves, and he's in charge of everything. And maybe Jesus knows these big questions to life and things. Well, Nebuchadnezzar runs up against that, where his go-to people don't have the answers for him. But the advisors follow a script. The king says he wants something, and then he said, okay, tell it to us, and then we'll give a meaning. But the system was rigged. They didn't really ever have to be honest. They probably were people that kind of put on a show. They were showmen. And so they would just tell him something that would kind of satisfy him. But the king goes against the rules. He changes the rules, and he says, actually, I'm not going to tell you what the dream is. And so I want you to tell me what the dream is and tell me what it means. And if not, I'm going to cut you to pieces. So the king is just done. He wants truth. You ever get to that place where, like, the things that you rely upon, maybe it's substances, maybe it's really unhealthy things, like looking at things or doing things, and or talking about things or talking about people, or judging people, or comparing yourself to others. I don't know. And you just say to yourself, I'm just done with this. Like, this just doesn't satisfy me anymore. I'm just done. Like, I want, like, real truth. Like, I don't want to play games anymore. Like, I want to feel whole. I don't want to feel broken anymore. I want something that has substance. You following? And you get to the place where you're just sick and tired of being sick and tired, and you're just like, I want what's real. I want the truth. And many times that's where people end up surrendering to God, and they find that in him. It's a beautiful thing in the life of a person where that happens, where get rid of our vices, our rationalizations, our substance, our defense mechanisms, our longings, where we just say, I really want the real stuff. So that's where Nebuchadnezzar ends up. And many times that'll show out in anger in our lives, because anger is a secondary emotion. It tells us that something's wrong. And so it's true with Nebuchadnezzar. And we find that there's actually, where his advisors were out of touch and lacking, we find that Daniel is in touch with heaven. And he's actually ready for what's going on. And so verse 12, it says, this made the king so angry and furious that he ordered the execution of all the wise men of Babylon. Wow. So the decree was issued to put the wise men to death, and men were sent to look for Daniel and his friends to put them to death. When Arioch, the commander of the king's guard, had gone out to put to death the wise men of Babylon, Daniel spoke to him with wisdom and tact. And he asked the king's officers, why did the king issue such a harsh decree? Arioch then explained the matter to Daniel. At this, Daniel went into the king and asked for time so that he might interpret the dream for him. So a new problem's been created. At first, the problem was just that the king had a dream and he's troubled. But now it's a life or death problem for Daniel and his friends. I mean, a lot of times the stuff that we see happening on a national level or world level, we may get worked up about it, but it's not really threatening to us. Like, if we really get worked up about what's happening with current events, we do want to have empathy for things that are happening. We do want to be, care for people that things are happening, but just walk out the door and just say, what's really going on in my life? But for this, the biggest problem has now come to the door of Daniel and his friends. And it also pushes against who's really in control. Because remember, it appears that Nebuchadnezzar's in control because he invades Jerusalem. He takes away captives and all the jewels and all the gold and everything. But then it shows that God gave it to him. God gave it to him. So our narrative gets messed with here, and there's threat. Like, was God really in control? Or is Nebuchadnezzar in control? Because he's about to kill everybody, and there's no hope. And so executions were about to be carried out to exterminate the game of the advisors. See, he saw it as a game. He says, look, he probably knew it before. He knew that it really wasn't truth that they were telling, but it made him feel better in the moment. He knew that it wouldn't really satisfy, and now he's like, I'm done with the game. I'm getting rid of the game. And so what Daniel does is he de-escalates with calm and the hope of clarity in the chaos. And this is what good leaders do. They lead well in the midst of chaos. They bring the hope of clarity, and they ask questions, right? I mean, studies have shown that when you're kind of being hijacked in your brain, if you ask yourself a question, or if you ask somebody a question, it doesn't have to do with what's going on. It will kind of take off that and interrupt that hijack of your brain. And so what Daniel does is, as he's being led away possibly to be executed, he says, hey, so why did the king make this decision? And what he does then is he actually puts himself even at more harm. He walks into the king's court, and he makes an audience with the king. Without being called, like we know from the book of Esther and other places, that if you didn't have an invitation from the king, you weren't supposed to go into his presence. But Daniel says, look, I'm going to die anyways, so why don't I just walk into the presence of the king and tell him, hey, can you just give me a moment? Just give me a moment to figure this out, and I think God's going to do something. And so that's what he tells him. And but remember, he's 18 to 20 years old. And this is what we learn, is that spiritual maturity and leadership is not based upon time lived, but it's based upon time lived with the Lord. I mean, I know teenagers that are more spiritually mature than people that have been in church for decades. And it's not because they've been given something different or they have something on that's different, but no, they really seek the Lord. Like, they really live with the Lord. They have an internal life with the Lord. They're not playing religious games. They're not just going through the motions. Like, they're really seeking his face. And they're really sitting with him in the mundane moments of life, so that when big stuff comes, they have it. It's really with them. And you may hear that and say, yeah, I know that, Cody. I know that my rhythm with church and God has been that way, that I've been going for years, and yet I don't really know that I have an intimacy with God. But what if you and I finished well? Right? I mean, it's not really how you start or how you could, but it's really finishing well. So the call of God on your life is still the same as it's always been. And it's first and foremost to know him and walk with him. And then out of that knowing and walking with him, he then leads you into the other things that he made you for. Because not one person here was made in an insignificant way. Each of you was made to be one that reveals and shines the very image of God to others in a unique way. There's not one made like you. There's no carbon copy of you. And so finish well. If you've just walked through the motions with religion and with Jesus, and you've kind of given a nod, but you kept him in his arm's length, it's a good day to open up your heart and your life to him and just say, Lord, I give it to you. I give everything to you. And then it doesn't happen overnight, but after a few days, you say, wow, I feel closer. And then after a few weeks, you say, wow, I'm hearing from God. I'm walking the life he's called me to. Wow, I'm not focused all the time on living for the world, living for God, managing my sin. But actually, I don't even think about that stuff anymore because I'm going after him and I'm walking with him. And so that's what he invites us into. So what if we finished well? And then Daniel, what he does is he goes into prayer and praise. Verse 17, it says, Then Daniel returned to his house and explained the matter to his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. He urged them to plead for mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that he and his friends might not be executed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. During the night, the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision. Then Daniel praised the God of heaven and said, "Praise be to the name of God forever and ever. Wisdom and power are his. He changes times and seasons. He deposes kings and raises up others. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the discerning. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what lies in darkness, and light dwells with him. I thank and praise you, God of my ancestors. You have given me wisdom and power. You have made known to me what we asked of you. You have made known to us the dream of the king." So Daniel and his friends used their time in prayer. You know, like, what would you do? That old question. What would you do if you had 24 hours to live? What would you do if you could change and influence things? You know, I mean, would you do a Google search? You know, what would you do? For Daniel and his friends, they seek the Lord in prayer and ask him for mercy upon his situation. Contrast their approach with the other advisors of him, right? They were brought up in the Babylonian mindset. They said, look, God doesn't dwell here. God's not here. He can't influence this. But Daniel knows that God is there and he can influence this. But notice that God gives the answer to him in the middle of the night. He's at rest. This is a hallmark of the people of God, is that the way we work, the way we fight our battles, the way that we receive from God is not frantically trying to make something happen, but is in a heart surrendered and at rest with him. You see, he always will fight our battles. He always is involved in those things. And yes, it doesn't happen without effort for sure. But know that it's a hallmark of those that follow God, is that we are at rest when he gives us the answers we need. And so Daniel praises God with a doxology of what we read actually in the book of Daniel. He praises God for who he is. He praises God for his wisdom and power, in contrast to the Babylonian Empire. That's what's happening here, is he's saying the Babylonian Empire, even though it looks like he's in control, is very thin compared to God and his wisdom and his power. God changes times and seasons and brings down and raises up kings. Wisdom and knowledge are God's, and he gives such to people. God knows all mysteries and uncovers them for people. Daniel gives thanks for giving him wisdom and power and for showing him the dream of the king. So we're not only seeing an account of like what God's doing in this situation, but we're also seeing an account of how God gives wisdom and power to people. Like, would you like the wisdom and power of God? Like, would you like a wisdom and power that's beyond the insufficient in wisdom and power of this world? If you have such, you're unstoppable. Because the New Testament writers write that even death has no hold on you, has no sting on you. So there's no enemy that hasn't been overcome if you have the wisdom and the power of God. God offers it to all people, but it comes through relationship with Jesus. And so now what we're going to read is we're going to read the account where Daniel goes through and he tells the king his dream and walks through. And it's one of the clearest prophetic words of what history would be like in the empires of the world after this time. And there's a last kingdom that has not happened yet. All of the kingdoms spoken of have come into existence, the kingdoms of man, and yet there's a last one that's still future. And it appears through the book of Revelation and other places that there's going to be kings and leaders that come about, and one main leader that will come on the earth and will he'll make a treaty between Israel's people and their enemies, the Muslims and others, and he'll bring peace. And yet it's not going to last long, because that's the start of a period of tribulation. There's peace for a bit, but then there's tribulation. And as we look at all of this, it seems that we live at the end of this time. You know, this time started 2,000 years ago, but it appears more and more as we see signs that we live near the end of this time. And some of you right now, you've been taught different. Well, I believe this about that. I believe this. Listen, the number one rule of eschatology, in other words, the last things, eska means last, is humility. Because the people that knew the Messiah was coming, when Jesus came, some of them didn't worship him and surrender to him because he didn't fit what they thought would happen when the Messiah would come. And so we can have our ideas, but ultimately we have to yield to God in humility and say, Lord, do it however you want, but it sounds good to me. Maranatha, come quickly, Lord, for this world is jacked up. That's in the original. So we see that God's kingdom is above all. In verse 24, then Daniel went to Arioch, whom the king had appointed to execute the wise men of Babylon, and said to him, do not execute the wise men of Babylon. Take me to the king, and I will interpret his dream for him. Arioch took Daniel to the king at once and said, I have found a man among the exiles from Judah who can tell the king what his dream means. The king asked Daniel, also called Belteshazzar, are you able to tell me what I saw in my dream and interpret it? Daniel replied, no wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner can explain to the king the mystery he has asked about. Now listen to this. But there is a God. If you have a physical Bible and that's not underlined, make sure you underline that. Or write it down somewhere on your mirror or the front of your car or whatever. But there is a God. What a thing. But there is a God. Even though all of this is going on, but there is a God that can do this. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. He has shown King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in days to come. Your dream and the visions that passed through your mind as you were lying in bed are these. As your majesty was lying there, your mind turned to things to come, and the revealer of mysteries showed you what is going to happen. As for me, this mystery has been revealed to me, not because I have greater wisdom than anyone else alive, but so that your majesty may know the interpretation, that you may understand what went through your mind. Your majesty looked, and there before you stood a large statue, an enormous, dazzling statue, awesome in appearance. The head of the statue was made of pure gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of baked clay. While you were watching, a rock was cut out, but not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were all broken to pieces and became like chaff on a threshing floor in the summer. The wind swept them away without leaving a trace. But the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. If you're paying attention, and we will explain this, but those are all the kingdoms and all the greatness of man in the world, and that the rock is Christ, and that his kingdom would smash all of them. And guess what? They're like chaff in the summer, where they would take the chaff apart from the wheat, they'd throw it up, and the wind would just take it away. And so if you're giving any government or any person or any system or any empire more weight than it deserves, remember James says that our lives are like a mist or a vapor, that it's there and then it's gone. That's what's being explained here. This was the dream. And now, this is verse 36, and now we will interpret it to the king. Your majesty, you are the King of kings. The God of heaven has given you dominion and power and might and glory. And in your hands he has placed all mankind and the beasts of the field and the birds of the air. Wherever they live, he has made you ruler over them all. You are the head of gold. After you, another kingdom will arise inferior to yours. Next, a third kingdom, one of bronze, will rule over the whole earth. And finally, there will be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron. For iron breaks and smashes everything. And as iron breaks things to pieces, so it will crush and break all the others. Just as you saw that the feet and toes were partly of baked clay and partly of iron, so this will be a divided kingdom, yet it will have some of the strength of iron in it. Even as you saw iron mixed with clay, as the toes were partly iron and partly clay, so this kingdom will be partly strong and partly brittle. And just as you saw the iron mixed with baked clay, so the people will be a mixture and will not remain united any more than iron mixes with clay. In the time of those things, the kingdom of heaven the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end. but it will itself endure forever. This is the meaning of the vision of the rock cut out of a mountain, but not by human hands, a rock that broke the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold to pieces. The great God has shown the king what will take place in the future. The dream is true, and its interpretation is trustworthy. So before the king, Daniel confirms that no human could tell the dream. That's good. He makes clear that God is here and active by saying God in heaven. See, in our Western mindset, when we think of heaven, we think that that's far away. But when Jesus said, "Our Father who is in heaven, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." How is that comforting to say, our God who is far away? No, in the Hebrew mindset, it was when God is in the heavens, it's saying he's in this heaven, he's here. Heaven is wherever God and his hosts dwell, and they knew that he dwelled here. And so what he's saying is hey, those guys said that God doesn't dwell here on the earth. God doesn't dwell here. But he's like, actually, the God, the only true God, actually does dwell here. And he's doing this. So Daniel, he humbly positions himself, and he's about to tell him, hey, you're going to fall, and everything you build will fall. But let me just tell you kind of nicely. God shared his dream with Nebuchadnezzar, a pagan king, because he's the first ruler of the times of the Gentiles. Jesus spoke of a time of the Gentiles where the Israelites would not be in charge of their land, and they would be ruled by others or be surveyed by others. Because you may look and say, well, Israel's there today. Yes, but that's just happened in the last several decades where they've come back to their land. But they're still surveyed by everybody else. They're not free. They have to constantly work deals with others to be able to be free, to be able to be safe. They're not in charge of their own place. And even them getting there, all sorts of deals took place for them to get that. And so they're not fully free on the land that they would have. So we're still in this time of the Gentiles that Nebuchadnezzar was the first king of. The dream explained is this, and this is the most complete prophecy of empires in all of history that you see. The Babylonian Empire is the head of gold. Took place about 605 to 539 BC. So 2,600 years ago is when this was shared. And then the Medo-Persian Empire had a chest and arms of silver. So it's Medo-Persian, and so the arms are like the two sides of this. That's why they share that. And then after that came, and that was 539 to 331 BC. After that became the Greek Empire, like Alexander the Great. And that was the belly and thighs of bronze. That was 331 to 146 BC. But then the legs of iron, right? The Roman Empire many times was described as iron because it just crushed everything. And that was 146 to 395, 146 BC to 395 AD. And since the fall of Rome, there has not been anything that even comes close to the Roman Empire. And you say, well, wait a minute, man. What about the U.S.? No, we're not an empire like that. I mean, we've never come close. Partly because the mode of the United States has not been to go take over everybody else. And so, but then there's this last kingdom with the iron and the clay. This one has not taken place yet. And so it's a sort of resurrection of the Roman Empire, and it's mixed with clay. And so it's really 10 kingdoms, right? Because it's the feet, and you have 10 toes. But it's not actually 10 countries, and so we would be in error of saying what the countries are. You can guess at it, and some people do. But in the verses that follow, it says that there's 10 kings. So the kings and who the people are is more representative of the 10 versus the exact kingdoms. There are 10 kings that come across. But we see hints of this, like with the European Union, if I can say that. Is we see hints of this, and you see unity with disunity. And so there could be kind of the birthing of that in our time with that. But it's clear that it won't last long because they're disunified. Iron and clay cannot be mixed together. And so, but that will be the breeding ground for possibly this world leader, the Antichrist, that embodies everything Antichrist and takes all glory for himself and even raises himself up as a god. But then we see God's kingdom, which is rock or stone cut out of a mountain that will crush all the kingdoms. So rock or stone is natural. There's no influence of people upon it. That's why this is Christ's kingdom. We've seen his kingdom come, but not in its fullness. And this is the fullness where it will crush all other kingdoms. I mean, isn't this good news that you know that God is going to work all things together? Isn't this good news that we see this laid out? And if he was able to speak this about the kingdoms that were to come there, it's like he said, it's sure. This will happen as well. And so it's a place of pause for you and I to say, what kingdom am I a part of? Am I a part of the kingdom of this world? And the answer is yes, but not of it. I'm in it, but I'm not of it. Am I truly a traveler passing through, like I'm of another place? Or have I given myself over so much to this kingdom that I can't even recognize God's kingdom? Am I just so distracted by the things that are shiny objects of this world and the things that this world offers and the things that I could have in this world that my heart and my life aren't yielded to his kingdom? It's good questions to ask. Because what we do know is this will not happen, in kind of a way that's like we'll be able to say, okay, here it comes. It's going to happen in a moment. The kingdom of the iron and the clay won't last long because in a moment, Christ is going to invade and crush it all. In a moment, he'll come back. He came the first time as a lamb. Lamb has no natural defense system. He laid down his life. He'll come a second time as a lion. He's the lion of the tribe of Judah. Also says he comes riding, the rider on the horse. And every knee will bow, and every tongue will confess that he is Lord. Either now or then. That's what we see. So Nebuchadnezzar, what he does is he says, then King Nebuchadnezzar fell prostrate before Daniel and paid him honor and ordered that an offering and incense be presented to him. The king said, surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings and a revealer of mysteries, for you are able to reveal this mystery. Then the king placed Daniel in a high position and lavished many gifts on him. He made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and placed him in charge of all its wise men. Moreover, at Daniel's request, the king appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego administrators over the province of Babylon, while Daniel himself remained at the royal court. Now, Nebuchadnezzar is moving towards God, and some of us are in that place today. We're like, okay, I feel like I'm moving towards God. I'm not quite there yet. But as we'll see in future chapters, he gets waylaid and he gets off of the main way because he's more dancing with significance than surrender. He's looking for signs to actually bring significance to his life versus things that actually give him opportunities to surrender. Daniel and his friends have surrendered their lives fully to God, and they enjoy gifts of influence. And as we wrap up this, to help you understand the difference between signs and surrender is this. This last week, Michelle and I went to Florida for a Vineyard Leaders meeting. It happens once a year, and we gather and talk and pray and worship and make decisions for the Vineyard USA movement. And we're down there, and so we got in super late. Our flight was delayed. We get into the Orlando airport. Anybody ever been to Orlando airport? Okay. Yeah, I'll pray for you. And so we get there, and we're like, things took a while. Bag took an hour, first mistake, checked a bag. But then we're like, okay, let's just go get the rental car. And so I see the sign that says rental cars. We go out there, but there's nobody there at the rental cars, right? And I'm just like, okay, what are we supposed to be looking for something else? We went back and forth. And then finally we saw this small little sign that you couldn't see if you're going that direction. And it says rental car counters. Okay, all right, so we go up there. We get there. The guy gets checked in. He says, I'm going to give you an upgrade on a car, but he doesn't tell me what the car is. He says, okay, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go over that elevator over there, go up to floor 3, and then walk past the food court, go over here, go to... At this point, I'm like, yeah, I'll look for the signs. So I go up the elevator, go back out, and we go back to where we went at first. Because in my mind, I said, well, I'm just supposed to go over there. And then we go back over there. At this point, I'm speaking other languages. And I'm saying to Michelle, she's saying, it's not a big deal, Cody. It's just traveling. I'm like, no, this is something else. And so we go back to the counter and I say, and there's two guys there now. I said, listen, I need you to make it real simple on me. How do I get to the car you gave me? And then he said, I said, there's no signs. I get up there, I don't see any signs. And they said, don't look at the signs. Don't look at the signs. Don't read the signs. And so we go back up there, and I'm like, Michelle's like, don't look at the signs. So we go through, and it's true. The signs would have led us astray. So we go through, we get down to the thing, then we get out to where the cars are, and then it says our car is in W16. Well, it stops at W12, and it starts up again at W18. Where is W16? But again, I said to Michelle, I said, don't look at the signs. And so I go back to the counter, and then the lady says, oh, your car's in W18. And so, no, don't worry about the car, people. This has a point. So, but I think it was a word from the Lord, not only for me, but for us as a people, is that when we look for signs, like sign is actually short for significance. You know, the people that when Jesus was around, they asked him, you know, will you show us some signs? Will you do something for us? Will you show us some miracle? Will you do something? It's so that they could see the significance of the moment. But as people of God, what we're supposed to be looking for is points of surrender. See, surrender is this. See, in that moment, they said, don't look at the signs. What was I supposed to do? Listen to my voice. Connect with me. Don't look for the signs of the world, too. Also, don't look for signs from me. Don't look for signs of anybody else that you've been living vicariously through their relationship with the Lord. You hear their voice. You hear their voice. Let me ask you this question. Can you hear the voice of God? Can you hear it? Ask yourself that. If you can't hear the voice of God for yourself or for others, finish well. Now is a great place to start. Because you will continue to be moved back and forth in this world that moves up and down and around. And do you really know the voice of God? Because Jesus doesn't promise anything else. He promises a close-knit relationship with him of knowing him and walking after him. Don't settle for anything else. Don't look for signs anymore. Look for his voice. Be led by him. Know him. It's not a time to be on the fence. It's not a time to go back and forth. And so, I don't know, you may say, but Cody, this has worked so well for me. I'm comfortable. Has it really? Surrender all of your life to him. Surrender all of it to him. Do not waver anymore. Because do you know where you meet God? You don't meet him in a place. You meet him in your person. The New Testament writers say that you are the temple of the Holy Spirit. And so he's always with you. And yet will you and I worship him? God is looking for a people that will worship him in spirit and truth. To the extent that he works in us and through us in this community is to the extent that we surrender to him and give our lives to him. It's clear all other kingdoms are insufficient. All other things are insufficient. And yet will you yield to him? He will do things in you and through you that you could never imagine if you will give yourself to him.
Thanks for listening this week. If you are looking for ways to serve, give, or get connected, go to vkcwest.com.